Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about the lower limb, part 1. So let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, when we're talking lower limb, obviously it's pretty obvious that we're talking about the leg, or everything below the hip bone. And as always, or not always, as has been with this particular unit, the information that's on the screen you certainly need for your test. So you certainly want to grab that, but there's no need just to read that to you. It's typically just basic facts, pretty straightforward. So as always, as I have been doing, I'm just trying to add some additional information, but a lot of the things that we'll be doing on those day 2 activities as a lab setting, just kind of going over everything about the particular bone that we're talking about, and this will be no exception, especially when we get to the individual ones. But kind of begin to start the process. There are 4 sections, and you can see the first 2 there, the femoral region, the crural region, and that's essentially, that gets you from the hip clear to the ankle. As you can see, with the femoral region being from the hip to the knee, and then the crural region being from the knee to the ankle. Of course, the femoral region is named that way because it would wrapped around the femur bone, which is a pretty special bone that we'll talk about. And the crural region, as you can see, that's where you're going to find your tibia and fibula. The last 2 sections, again, as you can see there, the tarsal region, the pedal region. The tarsal region, obviously, that's going to be the ankle area. And the pedal region, that's obviously the flat portion of the foot. And you can see there, just like what we saw with the hand, is that, when you think of 260 bones in the body, and you're thinking, man, that's a lot of bones. But the 2 hands and the 2 feet, I mean, they have a lot of bones. They're all obviously really small, and that's designed to make them as useful and flexible and adaptive as possible. I mean, just think in your hand, as we talked about back then, if it was just one solid bone, from the wrist out through, then you wouldn't have the flexibility. So having those sections, and the same with your foot. Once you get to what we call the ball of the foot, having those individual sections where they can be bent to some degree allows to better efficient, walking, running. I mean, if you're involved in running at all, whether it's a sport or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on having that rhythmic heel toe, as opposed to just coming straight down with your foot, in a more of a stomping manner, which long term could, just create a lot of injury and a lot of difficulty. But you can see there in the foot, you got your 7, 5, 14, so that obviously is 26. So if you think about between the hands and the feet, I mean, there are almost 100 bones associated with those 4 regions, and those are obviously pretty small regions. But getting into some of the bigger ones, starting at the top of the lower limb, the femur bone, and again, lots of information there on this screen and the next screen to write down. So, if I'm done talking and trying to move on, you simply hit the pause button, as you know, and finish up. But the femur bone, from a historical standpoint, one of the interesting uses outside of what the body uses it for is that if you've ever held a femur, and you certainly will in class, at least a model of one, or a fake one anyway, but they're pretty good size, pretty thick. And with that knob, I mean, if you're a church person at all and know your history, this bone would be referenced, back in the Old Testament whenever it was as a weapon. With that knob and the thickness of it, I mean, it's a pretty efficient weapon and would be do some serious damage in somebody's hands. But obviously, super thick, super strong. I mean, you get one, out of a horse or a cow. I can imagine a giraffe. I mean, how big a weapon that would be. That's almost, I mean, that would be even, I almost said baseball bat, but that'd even be longer than that, I would think. That I can't even imagine what an elephant one looks like. Now I'm curious. I have to Google that once I'm done here. But pretty good, strong, pretty thick, pretty strong. Obviously, very load bearing. Obviously, and it will be of the arm and leg bones. There are some that are kind of similar, and you'll have to just work out ways to make sure you understand which is which. And there's pretty obvious properties that we will go over, but the femur is not one of those. It's certainly the largest bone, and with that head that goes into your hip socket, it's pretty obvious which one that is. The two that students have the most issue with is the tibia humerus comparisons, and in remembering which one is the fibula, which one is the radius, as far as, because they're thinner and longer, but obviously the fibula is the one in the leg that's the much longer one of the two. The other ones that students kind of look at a little bit to say, all right, which one was this? That's going to be obviously then your the ulna and the tibia. They're kind of the same shape, but obviously the tibia is much bigger and longer. But we'll talk about all that in the right time. All right, some more information about the femur to capture. We talked about the head in the last one, so while you're writing, I'll talk about the other end, where the knee comes into play. You'll see it. You can kind of see it in the picture, but you certainly will see it when we're working with them in class. But it's pretty set up to where it sits right on that kneecap and in the patella, and we've got a couple of screens on the patella, how it sits in there. And of course, that's one that you can certainly feel and move, and when that gets dislocated, sporting events and whatever, pretty obvious. But it's just got some nice grooves, and of course lots of cartilage to cover that. And of course it's just encased in lots of tendons and cartilage, as I mentioned, and muscle around to keep that. And of course the ligaments in there, I mean, those are major knee situations, and if you watch any sports at all, I mean, you can see it pretty regularly. And as a coach over the years, especially when I was at Lockwood, a 1A school, because of the lack of resources, as a coach, just from experience, unfortunately, you got to learn a lot about what it looks like, or how to kind of do on game time analysis of a person's knee or elbow if an injury occurs, and unfortunately you learn to feel what it feels like when you take a person's leg and you kind of moving that bottom half left and right as opposed to forward or backwards, and how much flexibility there should be and how much there can be when those ligaments are torn. But all that will be fun to get involved with in class with you. All right, a couple screens on the patella. Again, that's the kneecap. It's kind of just meant to be like a little shield, almost like a turtle shell kind of a thing. just in the front there to protect it as much as possible from everything. And it's free floating. It's not connected only to the other bones. Now it is connected obviously with muscle and tendons and everything. So it's connected in there. It's supposed to be in one particular spot. But you can see things, injuries to where it's even pushed around all the way to the side, and that's obviously a bad situation. But you can see there at birth, it's almost completely cartilage, very soft, and just ossifies or hardens over the years. And by the time a person gets to kindergarten and first grade, it's pretty well ready to go. Okay, so just a little bit more. Obviously, it's, as I mentioned, it is connected. Things above the quadriceps, things below, just kind of that intermediary spot to kind of just support everything and do what it can to keep everything in place. Okay, looking at our next bone, the tibia. Again, the tibia, as I mentioned, and the humerus are ones that are, tibia is a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker than the humerus, but the obvious property that you can use to determine the two, separate the two, anyway, classify them, is that the humerus has a little bit of a knob, just like the femur, because it's designed to go into a socket. So it's got a rounded corner edge to it, where the tibia on both ends is designed to set. So at the top, it's got those two little kind of grooves to where the knee can sit down on top of that, and in the same at the bottom for the ankle, because there's going to be that rolling effect as opposed to just moving. You want that knee to bend, you want the ankle to bend. So it's more of a set and a little flexible where it can roll forward and backwards. So that'll be the way to tell that. But again, a pretty thick bone, especially a human, and but again a cow, a horse, those larger animals, it'd really be again quite the size there. Okay, so a little bit more about the tibia. I mean, I mentioned the two shapes on the front, or the top and the back, and you can see in between the tibia and the fibula, which we're about to talk about, there's those membranes, almost spiderweb type like. They're just designed to hold them in place. The fibula is more of a supportive bone for the tibia as opposed to weight bearing, as you'll see on the next screen when we start talking about the fibula. But that's just designed to kind of hold them together, hold them in place, as a way to help each other out and keep everything in line where it's supposed to be. But again, all these little terms and everything we'll talk about once we get to that day 2 type activity. All right, so here's our fibula. You can see it on the far left or far right, based on which one you're looking at. But it's long and thin. I mean, it's toothpick thin, and it is long, not as long as the tibia, as you can see, because it kind of sits below the top, kind of underneath that inner. Well, it's more back, but anyway. Edge, kind of a supporting thing, and then reaches down kind of to the ankle to kind of hang on to that and connect with that as well. And I forgot to mention that if you're watching a sporting event, especially football where it tends to happen more, but it can be in bicycle races or anything where the lower leg bone is exposed on the outside of the skin, which is just horrible to see, and you can imagine very painful for the person. But that's the tibia that you're seeing. You're probably seeing both, but visually from your from your seat into the stadium, or if you're watching TV live or highlight, it's probably the tibia that you were seeing. But again, fibula, supportive, tight bone, and it does mention there, but as you're writing it down, that if the body needs bone grafts, then this is where it comes to get that. So, mostly because it's not load bearing, so it's not a hindrance there. Okay, a little bit more about the fibula. As far as a comparison, it does look similar in nature to the ulna, as far as thickness and length, but it's just a lot longer and not nearly as thin as the other one, just obviously because it's just longer because it's in the leg. But again, we'll point all that out and we'll talk about all that at the appropriate time. All right, get down into the foot. As we mentioned, lots and lots of bones, and you can see already the structure is very similar to that of the hand. I mean, you've got those rows in what you call the palm, or the sole of the foot. You can see the green, you can see the yellow, color coded, and then you got the phalanges. You got those 3 rows of each having 3 sets of. So there's already 15 bones right there, just from the middle out, or from the middle to the end. So lots of bones there to go over, but luckily it's named similar. It's just numerical and with a little bit of directional reference to that. Okay, and so again, and you can see, right there where the white part, that's where the tibia would set with the fibula, on the side there, a little bit of a support, and then you can see the heel back there as well. And again, just designed so it can rock. Okay, it can rock. You can raise the front of your foot. You can lower the front of your foot in a walking manner to make that as efficient as possible. And just kind of wrapping up, most of this I've already mentioned that needs to be, but again, as far as naming the phalanges, again, just a little bit of reference to direction, and of course numerical, going from the big to the small, 1 through 5. But again, we'll work all that out on our day 2 activities. So just capture your information and then hit play again. All right, that brings us to the end of lower limb numero uno, number 1. Next time we come together, obviously we'll be looking at lower limb number 2. We'll see you then.